Muted.
Welcome everyone to session 2 of Serve Wisconsin's new Training and Technical Assistance webinar series. This one is about monitoring. And let's go on to the next PowerPoint slide. So objectives for today's session are understanding the purpose of monitoring activities, overview of the types of monitoring activities, review CNCS National Service Criminal History Check Interim Disallowance Guidance, review changes to some monitoring tools, and then answer questions from programs. And as always, if you have any question during the session, you can type them in the chat box, and either I will get to them, or if there are too many, or if I miss something, Jessica's going to take her shot at answering them. So let me just get another document on my screen. Okay, if anyone can't hear me okay, Jessica indicated there's some choppiness in my voice transmission, so let me know if you can't hear me. Type a message in the chat box. Okay, and just going on with the purpose of monitoring activities, AmeriCorps programs are funded through Serve Wisconsin can be subjected to monitoring activities performed by Serve Wisconsin. On the fiscal side, subject to monitoring from the Wisconsin Department of Administration Bureau of Fiscal Services, and then of course the Corporation for National and Community Service. And the Corporation's Office of Inspector General. And I wanted to show you, if you're ever interested in what the CNCS OIG is up to, you can go to their website, and after they complete an audit or an investigation, they report all their results on this website. For instance, here's one they just finished in January of this year on a program called Reading Partners that had a disallowance of $14,495. So they have closed investigations, audit reports, so you can get an idea of some of the things that the OIG is finding in their audits and investigations. And then this page, under operations and audits, they often, sometime around the beginning of the year, post a document that shows what their planned monitoring or audit activity is for that year. This is their 5-year plan. So that document, the activities for this year are not posted at this time. So that's where Serve Wisconsin will look to see if we show up on the audit list. So we're going to first take a look at the overview of types of monitoring. There's Serve Wisconsin monitoring tools, fiscal monitoring activities, financial reporting and Encore, fiscal desk reviews, and under that an update on how fiscal reviews will be accomplished, audit review, and then of course progress reporting, which is a form of monitoring. So up on now is the overview of Serve Wisconsin monitoring activities. This is actually an excerpt from the Program Director Handbook with some additional items added. So I'll just go through these. I won't get into detail. We're not going to go through each monitoring tool because that would take too much time. So the first item would be the document review. That's where we send you a list or a checklist of things that we want, documents that we want to review. We send that to you. We pick them up when we do our on-site monitoring visit, and then take those documents back to our office and do a desk review of those documents. The member eligibility review. That's something you have to complete for each of your members, and it has to be done on or before their date of enrollment. This is your best way of confirming that you have verified eligibility of members, citizen or permanent resident status, their age, and whether they have high school diploma. You could use the automated Social Security number and citizenship verification in the portal, but that can sometimes be not very timely or could come back where the automated verification could not be completed. So that could cause a delay. So by doing Serve Wisconsin's eligibility form, you would have that documentation of eligibility on the spot, and the corporation has approved that form for eligibility determination purposes. So that's your documentation. You have it in hand, and you can proceed with enrolling, and that member can start serving. Member file review. That's one of our longer monitoring tools. That's the tool that we use when we do the on-site visit. We give you the list of names, you give us the files, and we have a working space where we can work by ourselves and review those member files. If you organize your files or go use our checklist to review the documents you have in the member's file, that will help when we do our review, because you'll already have everything in the member file that we'll be looking for. One thing on the overall part of our monitoring practices, we provide you all the tools that we use, so there's no surprises. You can look at all of our monitoring tools. You'll know what we'll be looking for. And we found that programs that do look at the forms and have everything in order usually end up with a really short monitoring feedback report. So one of the things we do less often is the member supervisor interview or member focus group. Those are optional items that we can choose to do. And then a couple of the newer items that we have in our monitoring tools, 2 National Service Criminal History Check tools. One is the member checklist, which is a spreadsheet that we use. It's kind of a supplement, or can be a supplement to the member file review form, or it can be used as if we do just a sole National Service Criminal History Check monitoring visit. And then the other one is a grant-funded staff checklist. And we'll talk a little bit more about those kinds of things when we look at the disallowance guidance. Next is the performance measure review. We recently added the corporation's data quality review monitoring tool to that. That's something we do the first year a program is operating. And then every 3 years, or if there's a significant change in a performance measure. Program assessment and supplemental questionnaire. That's something we do each year. That's involving our on-site monitoring visit. And the supplemental questionnaire we send to you prior to the visit. It's related to member prohibited activities. And then there's the program director and financial director interviews, which we do when the program is new or if the program staff or Serve Wisconsin program officer changes. So those are all the Serve Wisconsin monitoring tools. Then we go to the fiscal monitoring tools, which includes the review of PER's invoices. So for cost reimbursement programs, those would be PERs, which serve as invoices, and then for the fixed amount, you would have your Serve Wisconsin fixed amount invoice. And then for programs other than the fixed amount programs, there's also aggregate financial reports and match reports. Another part of our fiscal monitoring is fiscal desk review. And then as part of that, we're switching from using a Coleman & Williams, which is an accounting firm in Milwaukee, to hiring an LTE, limited term employee, to do the fiscal desk reviews for us. Tom and I just met with a prospective reviewer yesterday evening. She's retired from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services Office of Inspector Generals. We're going through the hiring process with her, and we expect her to be on board soon. The only programs that are subject to the financial reviews are the cost reimbursement programs, since there's significantly less financial compliance with the fixed amount programs. And then a third area, financial review. Those of you who put together the additional documents when you submit an application for funding know that you submit a copy of your organization's audit. And then there's also requirements in the grant contract each year that if an entity gets a new audit during the year, there's some steps to be taken to submit a copy of that audit to the appropriate places. So the Department of Administration, Division of Administrative Services, reviews those audits for Serve Wisconsin. And they should be sending you or sending the organization the result of those reviews when they complete them. And then you may not think about it as a monitoring, but the quarterly progress reports, in addition to providing us information we need to report to the corporation, it's also our way of monitoring the progress you're making as far as enrolling members, exiting members, and making progress on your performance measures, as well as getting a general sense of how things are going for your program, both positive and maybe some negative things as well. So any questions about the Serve Wisconsin monitoring activities? If you have any questions, type them into the chat box. So let's move on to the relatively new interim CNCS criminal history check disallowance guide. So the document is dated in August of 2015. It wasn't available to us until later that month or early September. So on September 2nd, I emailed this guidance to all programs and noted that it would be in use and applied to all criminal history check items from that point forward. So the interim disallowance applies to all National Service Criminal History Check non-compliance findings. And it could be identified through oversight and monitoring from CNCS by a CNCS site or desk review, IPARA review, or even an OIG review, and also monitoring or oversight findings from Serve Wisconsin site or desk review. So the first thing we want to look at here is non-compliance and ineligibility and how those things relate to each other. And also there's another consideration that the corporation didn't put in this guidance, but which they've provided verbal guidance on, which is process. So you see here at the bottom of this, towards the bottom of this page, an ineligible individual is anyone who is registered or required to be registered as a sex offender or has been convicted of murder or refuses to consent to the National Service criminal history checks, makes a false statement in connection with his or her National Service criminal history check. So those are the only things that would make a person ineligible. It's both members and grant-funded staff. And if someone that is ineligible based on these criteria serves or works as a grant-funded staff person, any costs associated with those activities could be disallowed. Ineligibility versus non-compliance. Non-compliance, we're not going to go through this entire document. It's best if you read through it yourself. It goes through all, what we would do, so the threshold is two issues of non-compliance. So if two members or two staff have non-compliant results related to their National Service criminal history check, that causes, under this guidance, an expanded scope of review, which means all the currently serving members, all the current grant-funded staff would have to have their National Service criminal history check results reviewed by the monitoring official. Then we would go through each of these elements of this document step by step and calculate the level or determine the level of noncompliance and determine, based on this matrix, what level of the disallowance would be applied. We've already had two cases of disallowance. One was a total of $1,750, and the other was $1,500. The second one would have been greater, however, the program self-reported, and under the guidance, state commissions are allowed to reduce the level of disallowance by 50% for an entity that self-reports. So Serve Wisconsin chose to do this in this instance. If that same program would self-report and the second time, we could choose not to apply the 50% reduction. So this document is fairly complex. At this point, are there any questions? And I do apologize, this is my first time running a go-to meeting, so I'm having some navigation challenges. So let's move on here. So you may recall that we had a visit from our corporation program officer around mid to later summer of 2015 as part of her review of various processes that we have and monitoring forms that we have. She recommended some changes to some of our monitoring tools. So you see the list here. One of the things, there's two things for the document review form. She wanted 2 items to be added to the member grievance procedure, and the non-duplication displacement statement that's included in member contracts. She wanted also to have that in host site contracts. Member file checklist. Serve Wisconsin chose to discontinue use of the short form because of the unreliability of the automated Social Security number and citizenship verifications in the AmeriCorps portal. In the National Service Criminal History Check section, we added a checkbox for to refer to the new National Service Criminal History Check monitoring tool. And the next item is also from our CNCS program officer. We added whether the program obtained prior written authorization for the National Service Criminal History Check. In the portion about the checklist portion about the member contract, we added an item about the member contract specifying the amount of living allowance and whether it includes the correct education award amount. We added a new member position description section and added documentation regarding ending the health and child care benefit. And then for the program assessment, we added the same thing about child care and health care status change, and then added a program records retention question. So I want to quick take a look at those 3 items. So this is the document review form. So on page 2, for the member grievance procedure, these are the 2 items that we added under the alternate dispute resolution section. So now we'll be checking to make sure that that portion of the member contract notes that proceedings before the neutral party must be informal and the rules of evidence will not apply, and that with the exception of a written and agreed upon dispute resolution agreement, the proceeding must be confidential. And then here in the host site contract or agreement section, we added that the text of 45 CFR sections 2540, 100E, and F should also be included in your, if you have host site, should be included in your host site service contract or agreement. Moving to the member file checklist. So you'll see the member eligibility form section we're no longer looking for the short form because we no longer consider that a form that you should be using. Here's a checkbox if we're going to be using the National Service Criminal History Check Monitoring tool instead of recording the information in this section of the file review form. This is the item we added about obtaining prior written authorization, so we'll be checking to make sure that the program has done that for each member file. And then here's the items we added to the member contract section. Does the contract specify amount of living allowance the member will receive if it's applicable? There are some programs that do not pay a living allowance. And then does the contract specify the correct education award amount the member is eligible to earn? And then our CNCS program officer wanted to make sure we were checking appropriateness of member position descriptions. So we will be checking if there's a position description in the file. We'll be noting the member position title and whether the activities are allowable and linked to the program's focus. Following the healthcare and childcare sections, we added this item regarding cases where a member has been reduced to less than full-time status, been exited, or been suspended for a lengthy time period, whether the program has documentation that they notified the provider that the member's status has changed and the benefit should be stopped. The corporation does not have a good means of determining when people have exited. This is especially related to the child care benefit. They don't have a way to determine on a timely basis when members have been exited, so they've put that responsibility on state commissions and sub-grantees to take appropriate action when a member his status has changed that makes them ineligible for that benefit, to make sure the provider stops that benefit. Because the corporation has gone back to, there have been people that have continued the child care benefit beyond their eligibility period, so the corporation has gone to those people and asked them to pay back funds that they were not eligible for. So that's all for the member file checklist. And then we'll look at the program assessment form. And similar to the benefit not ending, we'll now be asking for programs that do have full-time members. We'll be asking the program what their process is for ensuring that those benefits are ended when the member eligibility has changed. And then also from our CNCS program officer, she saw our records retention schedule that we share with programs, and she was satisfied on the informing part of our responsibilities, but she wanted to know more, or wanted us to be doing more on the verification side of things. So now to comply with that, when we do our program assessment each year, we'll be asking program staff how and where they store their program and grant-related records to ensure they are complying with the timeline specified on that records retention schedule. So I'm just looking at some items in the chat box. So Andrew asked a question regarding member position descriptions, whether it should have a position title. I think it would be advisable that all your members have a position title other than AmeriCorps member. That would help with specificity as far as what the corporation is looking for in position descriptions, is whether or not the member is involved with prohibited activities and is working or serving in relation to the focus of the program. So any general comments or things like other duties as assigned should be avoided. I'm just looking in the chat box. Okay, I think we're done with the monitoring portion. I don't see any new questions, and Jessica's been answering some other questions in the chat box.
So one question was regarding how to document that the program has notified the benefit provider that a member has exited or their term has changed from full-time to less than full-time. This is a new requirement that we're going to be asking you to have some sort of proof that you have done this. An email would suffice, a letter, however you would normally notify the either Cigna or whoever else you're using for healthcare and childcare benefits to notify them of the members that have exited or changed status. So if you have any questions about what you do or what you think would be acceptable, please ask your program officer and we can help you out there. One other update that I wanted to give is regarding the next webinar session. Right here it says on March 9th we're going to do a retention webinar, member retention. America's Service Commission is actually going to be putting on a retention webinar put on by Amy Salinas later in March. So rather than duplicate what they're going to be doing, and I'm sure it's going to be fabulous and you're all Ask members, so you're allowed to participate in that. We'll make sure that you are aware of the date and time and all of that. So we're looking at March as being kind of a, how do you find answers and where do you find, what things are required, what are optional, what forms are required, what are optional. So kind of going through a lot of our resources because there's so many, both with CNCS and with us, and how to use them, how to find answers, so that you can find the answers to your questions before asking us or asking your peers. So we're thinking that's going to be the topic. We'll be in touch with more information about that and ask you for your questions about any resources that we have that we can walk through. It'll still be on March 9th at 1 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. So unless there's anything else, I think we'll wrap it up for today. Again, if you have any questions about monitoring activities, forms we're using, the Service Criminal History Check Disallowance Guide, you can contact your Serve Wisconsin Program Officer. Thank you all for joining us today. Bye.